Welcome to Safe Spaces, the podcast brought to you by Women's Health in Women's Hands Community Health Center. Join us as we delve into crucial conversations about gender-based violence, featuring survivors, advocates, and community members to raise awareness and offer insights on this crucial issue affecting our communities. We are your hosts, Leslie
and Tommy Lola. Safe Spaces is presented by the GBV Prevention and Cure Cascade Program, supported by funding from Women and Gender Equality Canada. Tune in to this podcast series, available on all major podcast platforms and our website, flourishaccess.ca.
Please be aware that this podcast covers sensitive topics such as domestic abuse and gender-based violence. To protect the privacy and safety of our guests, some have chosen to remain anonymous. The content of this podcast is suitable for those aged 16 plus. Welcome to today's episode of our Safe Spaces podcast, where we have critical conversations surrounding gender-based violence and its devastating impact on vulnerable communities. Your hosts are Leslie and Diana. This episode focuses on an often overlooked but profoundly affected group, the LGBTQIA+ community. While GBV can impact anyone, LGBTQIA+ individuals face unique forms of violence rooted in discrimination, stigma, and a lack of legal protections. From intimate partner violence to hate crimes, workplace harassment, the challenges these individuals face are compounded by the intersections of gender identity, sexual orientation, and societal prejudice. Today, we'll explore how GBV manifests within LGBTQIA+ communities, the systemic barriers to reporting and seeking help, and how we can all work towards creating safer, more inclusive spaces.
Okay, thank you for that, Leslie. Again, everybody, I'm Zana, the GBV case manager at Women's Health in Women's Hands. And we're going to get into our first question today, and that is, how does gender-based violence manifest differently within LGBTQIA communities compared to heterosexual and cisgender communities, and what challenges do LGBTQIA survivors of GBV face when seeking support or help?
Gender-based violence disappropriately affects LGBTIA+ communities in Canada, as individuals within these groups often face unique challenges rooted in discrimination, stigma, and exclusion. While GBV encompasses physical, emotional, and sexual violence, for LGBTQIA+ individuals, it often manifests through hate crimes, intimate partner violence, and workplace harassment. This is all fueled by societal prejudice and heteronormative expectations. In Canada, transgender individuals, particularly transgender women and non-binary people, are at heightened risk of violence. According to surveys, LGBTQIA+ individuals experience significantly higher rates of intimate partner violence compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And incidents of hate crimes targeting gender identity and sexual orientation continue to be reported across the country. This violence is compounded by barriers to accessing service, such as healthcare, legal assistance, shelters, where LGBTQIA+ individuals may face further discrimination or exclusion.
Thank you for that, Leslie. And I loved all those points that you touched on. And just for everyone listening, I wanted to give a few examples. So in terms of like unique forms of abuse, let's give an example of a transgender man in, say, a same-sex relationship may face abuse tied to his gender identity, where his partners invalidating his gender or threatening to out them. So that can also be a form of abuse that you even face within the community, where someone is trying to out you before you're ready as a form of control, which is also a form of abuse. And then this differs from abuse in heterosexual relationships, where such identities based on harm would not typically occur because both individuals are, say, known as cisgender or heterosexual, Whereas in an LGBTQIA relationship, one individual may not have come out yet, and another individual within the relationship may try and use that against them in that form as threat, which is then power and control. And then within the higher rates of hate crimes, transgender women, particularly trans women of color, experience disappropriately high rates of hate motivated violence. For example, in certain urban areas in Canada, reports of incidents increasing violence towards transgender individuals include physical assault, harassment on the streets. This also external violence is compounded when they also have to face discrimination and domestic violence, creating a doubly unsafe environment both at home and within society. And those are also perpetuated by the societal norms.
Also, it is sometimes that family members, they're disapproving of the fact that their relatives are, transgenders, or they're even outside of being a transgender, just being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Like, a lot of times, people, they're looked down on with shame and scorn. So I find that these people associated with these groups, they have like a harder time in life because they don't have safe spaces, right? Or it's harder to find safe spaces for them because their family members are giving them a hard time. In some cases, they're fighting with intimate partner violence. So in essence, what I'm saying is that the people of the LGBTQIA plus community, like, they have such a harder time because all around, like, we see that all around, in a lot of cases, all around, they're struggling. So with their immediate family members, with their partners, in workspaces, people on the road, just the general public.
Yes, I second that. And with that, we also want to say that it's not to say that there is no other groups outside of the LGBTQIA that also face a greater amount of oppression or abuse. But in particular, what we're focusing on is the LGBTQIA and the additional lack of supports that they face because of the way that they choose to want to show up and identify as.
Yes, of course. We're not downplaying at all that everybody has issues, but I think this conversation really is particular about this particular community, just because, we see that because of their life choices, a lot of people are not as accepting, right? So for that reason, we still have like homophobia. We still have, people who are not accepting or understanding that people do have a right to choose, and as such, they they seem to have like a harder life.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, how do societal norms and cultural attitudes contribute to GBV against LGBTQIA plus individuals.
So I would say there's a few different ones, and the ones I want to mainly touch on today are impacts of societal norms and cultural attitudes. So perpetuation of heteronormality, so heterosexual being looked at as the societal norm, as well as gender norms. And in many cultures, there's still, yes, in 2024, continuations of upholding heterosexual normalities and rigid gender norms that stigmatize but also put LGBTQIA members in greater harm because of the way that they choose to identify. And this can lead to prejudice, it can lead to hostility towards the LGBTQ plus individuals as well as communities and who do not fit what the traditional or societal norms are based on each individual. So when we're saying societal norms, that's as a society, that's not each individual person, but the majority of society. And then when we say cultural norms, each culture has their different practices that they go by that are ingrained sometimes for decades, hundreds of years. So those type of social norms hinder LGBTQ plus individuals. An example of that would be in conservative communities, expressions of same-sex affection or gender nonconformity may provoke negative reactions or even physical assaults. But then it can also, depending on what country you live in, we're going to speak on, in particular, say America right now, church and state do not mix. So if you can go into some establishments, depending on the state that you're in, and if they feel or you are visibly showing that you are a member of that community, they can refuse you service, yes, even in 2024, because of the whole thing of church and state not mixing together. So that's something where now societal norms also can impede someone's right to seek employment, their right to just go out and have fun, go to a movie, go to a gas station. And in terms of going to a gas station, yes, you may be able to pump the gas, but it's once you go into that store to be able to pay, what is the reaction that you may get from the cashier based on what societal norms they already have or culture norms that they have. And then you have normalization of discrimination and violence. So when societal attitudes deem LGBTQ plus identities as deviant or undesirable, it makes others feel it is okay to become more violent against that group. Why? Because now, because of culture or society, and depending on the culture, it may already be ingrained in that culture where you're looking at that group as lesser than.
Yeah, still
And
high levels of stigmatism.
yep, and that's very true. And the whole point is no matter how someone identifies, we are all still human beings at the end of the day. So nobody, however you identify, is lesser than the other. And then
Right.
an example of that would be, say, misgendering a transgender individual or using a slur that may be accepted as humor in some social circles or cultural practices and reinforcing hostile attitudes. And what we mean by misgendering someone, it's someone that has already told you, or when they introduce themselves, they told you how they identify, and you purposely chose to misgender them. Meaning, if someone identifies as they, consistently labeling them as she or he
Him.
when they've
Yeah.
told you multiple times, I identify as they, and then you're continuously doing it.
You know what I believe? I believe that it all comes down to respect, right? And boundaries, right? So
Yep.
as much as like society and societal norms and cultural norms, depending on wherever you're existing or wherever you are listening to this podcast, whatever it is in your country, or it's still very important to respect people, right? So if someone says that their pronoun is they or she, or if it's a transgender woman, say, okay, I'm a her, right? Be respectful, be mindful, you know, respect them, respect that person. So it really just comes back down to that. So as much as, like society tells you that, okay, well, heterosexual relationships, that's the norm, that's what it is. People have a right to choose, and you can't force your belief on people, right? In the same way, we just have to find a mid ground. We have to respect people. And that's
Yep.
basically what it is.
And I feel like we've lost that thing where it was put yourself in someone else's shoes or
Yeah.
not judging a book by its cover, understanding where this individual is coming from, understanding that would I want to be addressed in that way if I was this individual? But then also doing self-reflection on yourself and asking yourself, why is it that someone within the LGBTQ plus showing up as who they truly are and who they believe they truly are and know they are. Why does that need to affect you in such a way that you need to look at that person as lesser than, or to look at that person as not deserving of the level of respect that you require for yourself, as well as your own family, or because family sometimes isn't always something everyone has, the individuals that you hold closest to you. Treating everyone as how you would like when the individuals closest to you go outside, how you would want all their interactions with other individuals to be, paying that forward.
Very important. That's very important. Always put yourself in other people's shoes. For example, if you are a she, you would not be okay with somebody calling you a he. So if you tell somebody I'm a her, then you wouldn't be okay with somebody calling you a they or a them or a it or anything else. So just respect people's boundaries. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yes, most definitely. And on our third question, this, if you're listening, it brings more context to everything that we're talking about. And that question is, how does intersectionality, so race, gender, class, impact the experiences of LGBT plus survivors of GBV? And just for everyone listening, I want to give a definition of what social location is, which is what's going to be your intersectionalities. So social location refers to an individual's position within society shared by various factors, such as your gender, your language, race, socioeconomic status or social class, your age, your ability, your sexuality, sexual orientation, immigration status, geographic location, and your religion. And these factors influence how people perceive the world, but also they are influenced on how people perceive that individual as well. And for intersectionality of discrimination means discrimination that takes place on the basis of several personal grounds, which are the different social locations that I just mentioned, and identities which operate and interact with each other. So within those social locations, having an identity that would become oppressive on multiple scales. And while intersectionality is acknowledged that everyone has their own unique experience. So intersectionality of discrimination is such a way that it is inseparable. So you cannot control the way that your social locations interact, while intersectionality also is us being able to acknowledge that everyone has their own unique experience of discrimination and oppression based on their social locations.
So on that note, we wanted to add that intersectionality significantly shapes the experiences of LGBTQIA plus survivors of GBV by adding layers of marginalization related to race, gender, and class. LGBTQ plus individuals of color face compounded discrimination due to racism, homophobia, transphobia. All of these affect their access to protection and support. Transgender and non-binary survivors often experience higher rates of violence and stigmatization, particularly transgender women of color who face intersecting forms of transphobia, racism, and sexism. Economic inequality further limits access to resources, tapping some survivors in abusive situations. We do find that if you are a person of color and you're gay or you're lesbian or you're trans, so remember how we were talking about people of LGBTQIA plus community, how the stigma is so high in a lot of cases because of like cultural norms and societal norms. So I find that if you are a part of any of these communities and you're a person of color, like it automatically makes it a little more challenging for you, right? So now it's so much harder for you to get a job because you are a person of color and you're gay, or you're a person of color and you're a trans person. It makes it so much harder for people to see you as a person because of because you're not financially stable. Um, there are so many different factors when it comes on to being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and the different intersectional days. Like there are so many different things that you suffer, right?
Most definitely. And with all the social locations, let's give a little context to that. Say that you're either a South Asian, a Latinx, or African Black or Caribbean woman, that also you may be in terms of age, you may be middle class in age. So you may be 45, 50. Ability, you may not, you may have a visible disability. Your sexuality, you identify as somewhere along the LGBTQ plus. And then you also may not speak perfect English. And then you also may not be the religion of being Catholic, which
Yeah,
is, again, the more popular religion to identify as based on social location. So all those things now compound on your discrimination because of your social location and because of all those different intersectionalities of oppression that you're facing. So now when you go to seek support, the first thing everyone is seeing is those layers of your social location that is visible to be seen. They're able to see you have a physical disability. They may be able to see the range of your age. They're able to visibly see what your ethnicity or race is. They're able to hear that you don't speak the language of the country that you're predominantly in, as we're speaking about Canada. And based on how you may present yourself, they may judge what your social economic status is. And with all those compounding layers, with you going to get service, depending on the service provider, because we don't live in a perfect world as much as we would love to, depending on the service provider, they may look at all those visible social locations they can see and now determine, well, if it's healthcare, maybe you're not in so much pain.
yeah, maybe
Maybe
you're
you're
not a priority.
exaggerating that
Yeah.
pain.
Mm-hmm.
If you need mental health services, mm,
You're
maybe they
okay. You're
can
just being
maybe
extra.
they can wait because there's a cisgendered individual in the lobby.
Yeah.
Cisgendered being that you're white or European and you are Catholic and you're heterosexual. That's what
Yeah.
cisgender means. All those things now add to, are you going to get service? Are you going to get service right away? What is that quality of your service going to look like? And then again, that is now going to, maybe next time I'm not going to go forward for support.
So do you think though, Diana, that in some of these cases, like service providers, do you think at that point, do you think they maybe say to themselves, does this person even deserve service? Do you think that maybe comes across their mind sometime? Do you think they say, is this person deserving? Because this person is not so readily accepted by society. My culture or my belief is against this person's is against what this person is presenting, which is however they identify. So is it do you find that in some cases like a line is drawn to say, I don't think you deserve my help because you are not the norm. You're not normal.
As a service provider, also, honestly speaking, there are individuals within the assisting or helping profession or just being service providers that, as much as we don't live in a country that allows that, they'll find some type of loophole. Or you'll hear it in passing, or you'll just hear it in the way that the culture of the actual organization is.
Yeah.
Because also, sad to say, what we also have to look at is that because LGBTQIA isn't, it's not new to us, but it is new in the form of becoming more accepted, and then also in terms of service providers being able to get more funding. So, as much as an organization may say that they service certain individuals,
It's a
it is
front.
sometimes where you have to go and sadly have that service to realize this organization does not truly go by what their mission or their vision or their mandates are.
Yeah.
They're just doing it to say they're doing it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of that, I feel like in every space, someone does not want to feel like they're being tolerated. You want to feel like you're being heard and you're being seen as
And
the
your
human
feelings are
being that you
valid.
are. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're being validated. You're not just being, oh, they're just another number.
Yeah. And I believe too that even in in service, like in some service, I believe that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. So passionate that you don't see a person's color, you don't see their race, you don't see their sexual identity. You have to be so passionate that all you see if someone turns up to your facility to get help is that they're a person in need,
Yep.
right? Even for example, so
Mm-hmm.
if you're experiencing like intimate partner violence or whatever kind of violence you're experiencing, and you turn up to get help, it may be that it's justified why you're being hurt, why you're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's justified. The same level of care that would be extended to somebody else in another circumstance isn't necessarily transferred to you because of these intersectionalities. And that's really sad. It's unfair. It's unreasonable. It's inhumane because everybody matters. Everybody is somebody. We're all humans, right? However
Yep.
we look, however we shape, however, whatever the color of our skin, whatever our sexual preferences, we're human, and that first needs to be taken into account.
Yes. And that's very true as to what you said also, that you have to have a passion for what it is you're doing in everything you're doing, but especially when you're in a position that is meant to help individuals or provide individuals support, especially when there's nowhere else that they may be able to look within their own circle, their family, or their friends, because a lot of individuals don't have that. And a lot of individuals, those same circles are the places that they're looking for support from. They're seeking help from those supports. So if you're now service providers or agencies that are saying that you're here to provide a certain type of service, and now they come there and now they're further ostracized and meant to feel like, wow, there really just is nobody out there that wants to support me, because here's somewhere that's supposed to help me and I still can't get that help.
Can't get help. Yeah.
Going into our last question is, how can service providers, the community, and law enforcement better support LGBTQ plus survivors of gender-based violence?
I do believe that law enforcement should receive sensitivity training so that it can build trust with LGBTQIA plus individuals and enforce anti-discrimination policies to ensure fair treatment. Service providers, the community, and law enforcement can support LGBTQIA plus survivors of GBV by adopting inclusive, culturally competent, and survivor-centered approaches. Service providers should undergo comprehensive training on LGBTQIA plus issues, offer gender inclusive services, and prioritize privacy and confidentiality. Communities can raise awareness, create peer support networks, and advocate for policy changes to better support and protect LGBTQIA plus survivors.
I agree with that. And especially when it comes to service providers and getting the inclusive, culturally competent training around supporting LGBTQ plus individuals is very beneficial, because say a healthcare provider that has that sensitivity and inclusive and culturally competent training around LGBTQ plus individuals, When someone that identifies in that way comes into, say, the ER or goes to their family doctor or goes to a walk-in clinic or a mental health service provider, that trained healthcare provider is better equipped to handle a transgender or non-binary or transsexual survivor's needs without misgendering or minimizing what their experience is. But having that training, you're better able to understand maybe why they're talking in a certain tone, maybe why they're fidgeting in a certain way, maybe why they don't want to be touched in a certain way, maybe why they're asking for a private room. You're able to be more sensitive to that because you're aware now of what that person's lived experience is. But then also partnerships with organizations. So one of them that I always go to if I have a question or I have a client that requires certain supports or resources that I don't have access to is the 519. So the 519 is an LGBTQ plus IA spirited organization within Toronto that provides supports, resources for individuals within that community. So other service providers partnering with LGBTQ plus communities, because you also want to have individuals from those communities as the individuals that are also training the individuals that are going to be providing those services so that you're getting the most inclusive and culturally competent type of service and training that can be for your service provider, and building the trust through the communities as well as through outreach. So doing public education. So public education can look like campaigns against anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination that helps raise awareness. Maybe it's something around crowdfunding because those communities also have a more limited access to healthcare as well as mental health services, as well as just everyday regular needs. So maybe it looks like creating crowdfunding supports for those communities, and then also having law enforcement trained the same way. So having law enforcement, and also the biggest thing right now is representation matters. In all of these fields that we're talking about, service providers, communities, and law enforcement, representation matters. So within law enforcement, having individuals that also represent that community, that are on every single shift, that are within every single department, that are within every single division of the police. Same thing with healthcare, having individuals that represent that community from the moment that they walk in, from reception to the individuals that do labs to the surgeons, because at the end of the day, representation does matter. And it allows individuals sometimes to feel more safe that they're going to speak with someone that is either informed or someone that comes from and can identify with the community and the social locations that they also come with.
Thank you so much. That's actually very interesting, and you really did give us a lot of information there, even about the 519. That's something even I wasn't aware of, so thank you so much. I'm pretty sure
You're
that
welcome.
we 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 will at some point, if we need access to information, then we should be able to go over and get some information or get some assistance or access service through that. So thank you so much, Sayana. Like, I really appreciate the fact that you came and you brought so much information. And I'm pretty sure that the conversation that was had here today, even as we were talking about how can community members and law enforcement support the LGBTQIA plus community, it's conversations like these, that build awareness, that reaches the right ear at some point, or someone in passing, they get a whiff of the conversation. So it's even through conversations like these and building awareness, right, that we're able to effect change, because if these uncomfortable conversations aren't had, then in some cases people won't even know what some of the struggles are or some of the issues are. So thank you so much. I really did enjoy the conversation. And thank you to our listeners as well. Remember that together we can work towards a more inclusive and safe society for everyone.
Thank you again, Lesline, as well. And I hope everyone listening was able to take something from what you heard today, but also to pass it along and to share it and to become an ally for also individuals within these communities.